Melly Plinius, also known as the Entomologist, is one of the survivors in the game. She took part in the manor game, specifically the final one, which we all know as Ashes of Memory. This event is believed to have happened in July 1902. Today, we're going to talk about Melly's story based on everything we know so far. Keep in mind that some of this is based on theories and my own interpretation, so it's not official. I'll do my best to stick to the most logical explanations. This is your broadcaster, Silmina, signing in.
说来可笑，我曾相信过那些愚蠢的幻影，但那一切却随着这些世俗的喧嚣支离破碎。放弃浮华的表象，我选择重生，去探索那些真正帮助过我的小生命们。进入那些荒野，真正的智慧隐匿其中，而我将成为他们的主宰。
Melly's first name comes from the Greek word Melly, which means both bee and honey. This perfectly fits her love for insects, especially bees. Her last name, Plinius, is likely inspired by Gaius Plinius Secundus, better known as Pliny the Elder, a famous Roman naturalist and scholar. This suggests that even her name hints at her deep interest in science and nature. During the events of Ashes of Memory, which takes place on July 1902, Melly is 28 years old. That means she was born on December 1873. She grew up in a poor village, but the exact location remains unknown. Her mother's name was Anna Ndlovu, which suggests that Melly's birth name was actually Melly Ndlovu. The surname Ndlovu is common among native groups from Eastern and Southern Africa. This raises interesting questions about her heritage, even raises the possibility of her being a mixed race. In fact, figuring out Melly's nationality is tricky because there are so many different theories. In Ashes of Memory event, Alice believed she was of Eastern European descent or was involved in outdoor activities for long. Her African surname adds another layer of mystery. There are also theories that she could have Russian, Greek, or Italian roots, but at the end of the day, we don't have a clear answer about her true origins. Melly's childhood was marked by pressure from her parents, as revealed in her first birthday letter. The villagers described her as having an unhappy upbringing due to the high expectations placed upon her. Her parents even went so far as to call her an old maiden, which, in my take, implying that they pressured her to marry early, as was customary in that era. Born into a poor family, Melly eventually found work as a servant in a manor to support her family financially. She sent a portion of her earnings back home, showing that her parents depended on her as a primary source of income. Even her mother, in her first letter, said that Melly's job is all that the family has for a living. Despite this financial dependence, Melly's parents, perhaps due to lack of knowledge or stigma over women, did not fully support her personal ambitions. In her letters, it is known that Melly expressed her growing interest in entomology, which was sparked by Joshua Plinius, the manor's owners, and a renowned biologist. She secretly studied insects, using his research materials as a way to talk and connect with him. However, her newfound passion worried her parents. Her mother, in particular, feared that her interest in insects would distract her from her job as a servant, leading to potential dismissal. This reaction reinforces the idea that her parents were traditional in their views, believing that a woman's value lay in household duties rather than education or scientific pursuits. Over time, Melly and Joshua fell in love, drawn together by their shared interest in entomology. Eventually, they married, but their relationship did not remain happy for long. According to her deduction notes, their marriage was initially filled with joy. However, as time passed, cracks began to form. Melly started relying on sleeping pills, which suggests she was struggling with emotional distress. The reason for this distress is unclear, but it is possible that she was unhappy in her marriage and used the pills as an escape. This is further supported by another deduction note, in which Joshua is seen complaining that Melly was stuck in her own ways. This statement could imply several things. One possibility is that Melly, shaped by her strict upbringing and personal ambitions, resisted conforming to the expectations of a Victorian wife. In the Victorian era, women were expected to prioritize household responsibilities over personal pursuits. Higher education for women was rare, and those who did not marry were generally discouraged from seeking academic knowledge. Melly, however, had developed a strong passion for entomology and refused to abandon it, which likely created tension between her and Joshua. Additionally, in the Victorian family hierarchy, a wife's role was secondary to her husband's. Joshua may have expected Melly to submit to his authority, while Melly, in contrast, wanted to be treated as his intellectual equal. She likely wanted their relationship to be both a romantic partnership and a scholarly one. However, Joshua did not see her in that light and may have grown frustrated when she prioritized her studies over her household duties, or when Melly tried to be equal with him in terms of study. This implication becomes even more evident in Melly's third letter, where it is clear that she was viewed merely as Joshua's assistant rather than his equal. One striking example of this is that, out of an 80-page interview, she was given only a single page to introduce herself. This suggests that her contributions, despite her expertise, were largely overshadowed by Joshua's reputation. During the interview, Melly appeared edgy, uneasy, and reluctant to speak, a behavior commonly observed in dependents of great scholars. This implies that she restrained herself, possibly out of fear of displeasing Joshua or to avoid conflict. Her hesitance to express herself could be a reflection of how much she had to suppress her own ambitions and identity within their marriage. It was also around this time that Melly encountered Orpheus. According to her fourth letter, while accompanying Joshua on a trip to the Mediterranean, she met Orpheus in Paphos. Paphos itself is the name of a city in Cyprus, so it may refer to that one. Melly's observations about Orpheus describe him as a reserved and introverted man who was traveling with two colleagues. Among them, one individual stood out, a scholar specializing in mind-altering substances. He had a sharp tongue and a loud personality, contrasting sharply with Orpheus's quiet demeanor. The identity of this mysterious scholar remains unknown, but given Melly's documented connection with Sam Bourbon, it would not be surprising if this person turned out to be him. If this theory is correct, it could hint at a deeper, possibly unrecorded, interaction between Melly and Sam, one that may have influenced her later actions. The growing conflict between them eventually led to a legal separation, as referenced in one of her deduction notes. However, this was not a full divorce. A separation agreement simply allowed them to live apart while still being legally married. This might explain why Melly continued to use the surname Plinius, rather than reverting to her maiden name and referring Joshua as her husband during Ashes of Memory. One of the most mysterious aspects of Melly's story is the death of her husband, Joshua Plinius. After some time, Joshua mysteriously died after being stung by a rare, poisonous bee species. Melly notes that she could not find the bee species in her husband's research, which she found strange, as Joshua was a meticulous person. However, what makes it even more intriguing is how he died. In Ashes of Memory 2, a newspaper article reports his death, with a subheading suggesting a possible assassination. Although it is never explicitly stated that Melly was responsible for Joshua's death, several clues point in that direction. His cause of death was attributed to the venom of a rare species of bee, an area of expertise for Melly. As an entomologist, she would have had the knowledge and means to acquire and utilize such a bee. One significant detail appears in the Ashes of Memory PV, where a specific bee is shown with the scientific name Apis mellifera scutellata, also known as the East African lowland honeybee. Given Melly's mother's surname, Ndlovu, it is possible that Melly obtained the bee from her homeland and, perhaps, crossbred it with a more dangerous species. This would explain why Joshua, despite his meticulous research, had no record of the specific bee that killed him. Melly's character design also gives us a big clue about her story. It is specifically mentioned the worker bee, the queen bee, and the drone as key ideas for Melly's backstory. If you don't know, the queen bee is basically the mom of the hive. Her only job is to lay eggs. The drone is a male bee, and he mates with the queen. After they mate, the drone dies. This whole bee thing is a pretty clear comparison to Melly and her husband, Joshua. Melly is often seen as the queen bee. Even Orpheus calls her that in his book. She mates, or in this case, marries the drone, which is Joshua. And just like the drone, Joshua dies after marrying her. Basically, just like how the queen bee is the reason the drone dies, Melly is the reason Joshua died. Further evidence can be observed in Melly's 2022 Christmas event. During this event, she discussed the duality of insects, noting their potential to create both medicinal cures and potent weapons. She also specifically referenced the use of bees as weapons. The reason why Melly might have taken her husband's life has not been clearly stated. However, if we examine her once series skin, it appears that Joshua was plotting something, possibly against Melly, and succeeded. Whatever the conspiracy might have made Melly furious, and she decided to kill him. After Joshua's death, Melly seemingly disposed of the bee, making it difficult for investigators to determine whether it was an accident or an assassination. Unless the authorities had an entomologist with knowledge equal to hers, solving the case would have been nearly impossible. With Joshua gone, Melly inherited his wealth and was finally free to pursue her interests without restriction. However, rather than finding happiness, she became increasingly isolated. One of her deduction notes reads, "How will I face the rest of my years with so much missing in my life?" This suggests that, despite achieving what she thought would bring her freedom, she felt an overwhelming emptiness. Some theories suggest that Melly began regretting her actions, realizing that her obsession with independence and entomology had cost her the ability to form meaningful relationships. As time passed, she withdrew further from society, preferring to immerse herself in her studies. Her character design notes mention that after inheriting astonishing wealth, she is still obsessed with traveling through dense forests, swamps, and wilderness in search of strange insects and rarely appears in public. Moreover, she covered her face with a veil, possibly as a symbol of her detachment from the world. Her 2021 deduction question reinforces this idea. Instead of my face underneath this gauze hat, I wish you'd be impressed by my abilities. Similarly, the description of her everyday life skin states, with each passing day, the face beneath the veil became more and more unfamiliar, even to herself. This suggests that Melly no longer recognized the person she had become. Once a poor but hopeful girl, she had transformed into an ambitious, yet deeply lonely woman, unable to reconcile her past with her present. One day, Melly receives an invitation to the manor. Along with it, there's a specimen of the very bee that was apparently used to kill her husband. This shocks her. It feels like blackmail. If someone knows what she did, she has to find out who. Maybe she comes to uncover the truth, or maybe she has a darker reason, to make sure no one lives to expose her secret. Either way, she accepts the invitation and heads to the manor. As for what happened to her in the manor, it's shown during the Ashes of Memory event. After finishing each character's story in Ashes of Memory, I'll delve into the event itself in a separate video, since the Ashes of Memory story is extensive, still incomplete, and has many missing puzzle pieces and speculations. Feel free to add anything I missed. This is your broadcaster, Selmina, signing out.